Hey everybody, welcome to the Morning Devo with Bo O. It is February 1st, Wednesday, 40 degrees outside maybe. It feels nice and crisp, very, very cool. Yesterday was kind of one of those weird days where it seemed warm and then at night that wind picked up and then it got really nice and chilly. Once again. So, yeah, that weather, gets kind of warmer, gets kind of cooler. You never know with the desert what it's going to be like. So, we're going to be finishing up the book of 2 Samuel today, chapter 24. We're going to finish it up. The end, as we say in Hawaii, pow, it's done, right? Finished. And, that's right. I remember working out there, and everybody would say, pow, pow out. I'm done, finished. And so that's what we're going to be. So you could always check out the archives of my devotion times through the Bible. And again, I do my devotions just through the Bible. Instead of just picking apart a little section, hey, let's just go through the Bible, see the big pictures, kind of get to understand God a little better and how he's working in this thing we call history. And it's really interesting, but a lot of our questions about God gets answered as we just literally go verse by verse and just walk through it. We kind of go, oh, I see what God's doing. Oh, I see why God did this. Oh, I see why God did that. Yeah, many of our questions that we have are just simply because we've never really read it. And when you don't read it, then, you kind of run into some problems, right? You're just not finishing up things. So you're not getting the complete story. So, hey, let's get into it. 2 Samuel 24. Let's pull out some of the stuff here. And it says, once again, the anger of the Lord, the anger of Yahweh. Ooh. Whenever we see the anger of the Lord, it's, pretty serious stuff, right? It's interesting. Anger of the Lord. You can anger God. So God isn't, the Bible makes it really clear here that God isn't out there somewhere in the great beyond who's kind of not into us. But when it says the anger of the Lord burned against Israel, man, it's a personal being. Interesting, huh? So, God is personal. That's what the Bible constantly affirms. Not that he's oblivious to the decisions of human beings, but he's in the midst. He's there. And he personally has an investment in it. Yeah. Kind of interesting. I guess maybe it's like someone who creates something. We might have an investment in that item which we created. So maybe that's a simplistic way of viewing it, but certainly helps us just understand in the morning, this morning, today, as we read that, the anger of the Lord burns against Israel, is that God is a personal being. And a personal God, we wouldn't be surprised. If God is personal, he must, in a sense, reach out. He will reveal, right? Unveil, show himself. God is an unveiling God, a revealing God. Now we know there's a problem between us and God. That's what the Bible all is about so far, right? We got this problem of sin. We have books in the Bible that are all about it. The books of Leviticus, the books of Numbers, the books of Exodus, right? Deuteronomy. There's a big issue, big problem. And this is this one of sin and being able to draw close to God. And God in his mercy continually reaches out, and he does to David, King David. And the anger of God, it says, burns against Israel. So I guess all the tribes, you could say. And he caused David to harm them by taking a census. Interesting, the causality of God. This is one of those ones that you could call or the friends that are reason for hope and ask about this passage. Hey, how did God cause David to harm Israel by taking a census? How does that work theologically? Those are great questions. And by golly, when you read the Bible, you should like, when you get to these sections that seem a little interesting, theologically, like, is God causing? How does God cause? Is human will involved in this? What, blah, 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 blah. All the questions that you might have, you don't move away from those questions. We move towards them, right? We want to find the answers to those things. So, but for our purposes today, let's just read through it. And it says, and the Lord caused David to harm them by taking a census. Go and count the people of Israel and Judah, the Lord told him. So the king said to Joab and the commanders of the army, take a census of all the tribes of Israel, from Dan in the north to Beersheba in the south, so I may know how many people there are. But Joab replied to the king, may the Lord your God let you live to see 100 times as many people as there are now. But why, my lord the king, do you want to do this? So by Joab's reaction, we know there's probably some other things going on here. Right? Really interesting reaction by Joab. Joab, quite a violent dude, right? Yeah, the Joab that we read in 2 Samuel, pretty intense dude. But what does he say to David? Hey, David, man, I want you to live so you see Israel flourish and grow. Why are you going to do this? Why are you doing this, man? You get the idea that there's some kind of motivation in David that's not really too good. It's not a very good one. But the king insisted that they take the census. So Joab and the commanders of the army went out to the court to the people of Israel. First, they crossed the Jordan and camped at Orier, south of the town in the valley, in the direction of Gad. Then they went on to Jazer, then to Gilead, in the land of Tathim Hodshi, and to Danjan, and then around Sidon. Then they came to the forest of Tyre and all the towns of the Hivites and Canaanites. Finally, they went south to Judah as far as Beersheba. So, hey, for all you archaeologists out there, go at it, right? Have fun. This is what it's about, right? Learning where places were, what they were called, do the digging, do the findings. And man, there's some great websites out there. I was just looking on one, I think it's called Patterns of Evidence, where Christian archaeologists, man, they dig up all kinds of cool things. It's very neat, right? It certainly blesses us. God, maybe we know that you are a personal God and that you work in moments of history. I mean, how cool is that, right? I mean, that's neat. Having gone through the entire land for 9 months and 20 days, that's a long census, right? It says, they returned to Jerusalem. Joab reported the number of the people of the king. There were 800,000 capable warriors in Israel who could handle a sword, and 500 in Judah. So we get a little more specific as to this census and maybe what this thing was about. And that the Joab records the number of warriors from the northern tribes and then the southern tribes. And it could be that this is really not a good thing, because it's really about David wanting to, in a sense, see how large his army is. And you might say, well, why is that such a problem? Well, I don't know. Let's read on. But after he had taken the census, David's conscience began to bother him. Interesting. And he said to the Lord, I have greatly sinned by taking the census. Please forgive the guilt, my guilt, Lord, for doing this foolish thing. So David knew this was wrong. Why was it wrong? And the anger of the Lord burns against Israel. And there's this work of God and also a work of the will of man here going on. And And there's a human responsibility. David says, hey, I've sinned. I did this, and he comes before God and he confesses. Now, I tend to think that because of what Joab has revealed in the census, that it is the army of Israel, that there's a principle at work here. It's a really important one, too. It's one we saw in the book of Joshua. But it's one of this, is that, God is going to get the glory for the victories of Israel. It's not going to be Israel that's going to get the victory, but it's going to be the Lord. Why is that a big deal? Because if man glories in ourselves, if humans glory in ourselves, then we become the prideful crew. We become the prideful bunch. We become the ones that think we got it all together. And then what happens is we do things out of our own foolish ambition and vain conceit. Philippians chapter 2. Do nothing out of foolish ambition or vain conceit, right? But humble yourself like Christ, right? Come underneath God. Humble, humility, submit, surrender to God, meaning God needs to be the judge of us. He needs to be the ruler of us, not us being our own gods and thinking we got it all together. If there's no one else to look up to, then alls we will do as humans is look down. C.S. Lewis observed that, right? If there's no one for us to look up to, we will constantly be looking down at people. Yeah, and that's very true. Back we learned in Joshua that God said, hey, you know what? You want to take a big army? Let's knock that army down a size so that I get the glory for the victory. That it's me that does the work, even through you, to will and do according to my good pleasure, that it's God's work in us. And again, if we don't think that way, then we think it's our own effort, our own intellectual abilities. That it's we who created ourselves, right? That we become, in a sense, the creators. Oh, we are so powerful. Oh, yeah? How powerful are we? And, this is the problem, is when we start getting things, we start getting cocky. And we start thinking we're all that. And then we got to not be knocked down a peg or two, right? And this has happened. Just think of the news and the people that are in the news. Famous people that make a ton of money, but then at some point they get knocked down, right? And it's just a constant of that, right? Someone who's famous, then they're no longer, get knocked down and get humbled, things like that. And we need to stay in that humble place. And as Israel grew and that army grew, there's no doubt King David said, hey, guess what? We got quite an army. And I want to see how much is there. It reminds me of something else, too. Jesus said, don't let your right hand know what your left is doing. Sometimes our security comes from finances. Hey, let me just go to the bank account once again and count the money. I'm just going to count all the money. And, oh, now I feel good, Instead of just going, hey, is my good feeling, is my good vibe, is it coming from the work of God for me? Is it coming from my God? Or is it coming from other sources? There's a principle in the Bible, too, that God will not share his glory with another. And that's something important to remember. God will not share his glory with another. Why? Because there's nothing as glorious as God, right? And God is the ultimate. God is the deity. If anything should be glorified, it should be the perfect, not the not so perfect, or the not perfect at all. And David maybe wanted to get glory for himself, glory for the amazing feats, Look at how mighty our army is. And God says no. Well, at some point, David realized that his heart was not in the right spot, and that he was thinking more about maybe himself and his own boasting than really the Lord's goodness and the Lord's glory and the Lord's grace and the Lord's mercy in your life. Do I boast in the Lord? Do I make my boast in the Lord? See, salvation is by grace through faith. Why? So that no one may boast before God. Hey, I'm into heaven. Check this out. How did I get into heaven? Oh, well, because I'm so good. I'm such a good person. I do so many good things. That's why I'm in heaven. See that? That's your boast. And no, how can you boast before God? How can you boast before the deity? How can you boast before the Creator? Man, you can't. And we shouldn't. And so our salvation is by grace. It's a gift to be received. That's cool. All that from this little census that we get here in the latter stage of 2 Samuel. So it says, the next morning the word of the Lord came to the prophet Gad, who was David's seer. And this was the message. Go and say to David, this is what the Lord says, I will give you 3 choices. Choose one of these punishments and I will inflict on you. So Gad came to David and asked him, will you choose 3 years of famine throughout your land, 3 months of fleeing from your enemies, or 3 days of severe plague throughout your land? Think this over and decide what answer I should give the Lord who sent me. I'm in a desperate situation, David replied to Gad. I guess so, huh? That sounds pretty desperate. And then it says, but let us fall into the hands of the Lord, for his mercy is great. Do not let me fall into human hands. I love that. That's really wise. It's really cool that David would say something like that. Hey, let me not fall into human hands, because I don't know what humans are going to do, but let me fall into the hands of the Lord, into the providence of God, meaning I want to be in God's hands. I don't want to be in human hands. It's interesting. David saw that humans, they got a will of their own, man, and they go all kinds of directions. God wanted to be square in the will of God, even if it was during a time of punishment, a time, if you will, of judgment on him. And that's the beauty of David. David knew that even the judgments of God were right. The judgments of God were right. They were right for him. This is where humans, we struggle. No, God, you're not right in judging me. You're not just in judging me. I deserve better. I deserve more. I am great. I am the best. I deserve more than what I get. That's how, we see ourselves way too high, right? Way too high. Very selfish. And David got to places so often in his life where he would say things like this, that, hey, you know what? God, you do what you need to do with me. We're going to fall into your hands and you're going to do the right thing because you are a just God. Man, that is some faith right there. That's for sure. A lot of people would rather fall into human hands. And this is where a lack of faith is seen in so many of us humans. So the Lord sent a plague upon Israel that morning, and it lasted for 3 days. A total of 70,000 people died throughout the nation. Again, the people, how many people died at the hands of King David? Unreal. Unreal. Blows your mind. Leadership matters. Governments matter. People making decisions, man, really affect massive amounts of people. They died throughout the land from Dan to north to Beersheba in the south. But as the angel was preparing to destroy Jerusalem, the Lord relented and said to the death angel, "Stop, that is enough." At the moment, the angel of the Lord was by the threshing floor of Araunah, the Jebusite. When David saw the angel, he said to the Lord, "I am the one who has sinned and done wrong, but these people are as innocent as sheep. What have they done? Let your anger fall against me and my family." Wow, this is really cool. It sounds a little bit like in the New Testament where the Apostle Paul says, hey, let me be accursed for the sake of Israel. Let me be cursed. That's what one of the writer of the New Testament says, most of the New Testament, right? Paul the Apostle. He says that in the book of Romans. His heart for Israel is so strong. He says, hey, I'd rather be accursed and Israel be saved. And that's just an expression of Paul. And here David has that same expression. Man, I don't want my people to die. Take me. Take me. I'm the one who's at fault here. I'm the sinner. He sees his grievous sin. He's, burdened by his grievous sin. He sees the destruction that it has caused. Help us, God, to see the destruction that our sin has caused in the lives of others, and help us to come to you in this kind of honest way. God, it's me that has sinned. Wow, what a confession, huh? Just lay it on the line. It's me that has sinned, right? We don't need to say anything more, anything less. Just lay it on the line. Let us be honest with our Creator. That day, Gad came to David and said to him, go up and build an altar to the Lord on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. So David went up to do what the Lord had commanded him. And when Araunah saw the king and his men coming toward him, he came and bowed before the king with his face to the ground. Why have you come, my lord the king? Araunah asked. David replied, I have come to buy your threshing floor and build an altar to the Lord there, so that he will stop the plague. Take it, my lord the king, and use it as you wish. Hey, do whatever you want with it, man. Just get rid of the plague. Right? And Araunah said that to David, and here are the oxen for the burnt offering, and you can use the threshing boards and ox yokes for wood and build a fire on the altar. Hey, here's this, here's that, here's this. Go do it. Right? And it says, I will give it all to you, your majesty, and may the Lord your God accept your sacrifice. Wow, your God, David. May God, spare us, but take everything. Now, it's interesting. The place where this is actually Mount Moriah. For all those Bible students, bing, 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 Mount Moriah. That sounds familiar. Mount Moriah. Let's see. Abraham offered Isaac. Mount Moriah. That's interesting, right? The temple would be built on, in this area too. Jesus died on, whoa. Kind of interesting, right? So David gets the field, right? The plague will stop through the sacrifice where? On the mountain. On what mountain? The mountain, right? Whoa, that's kind of cool, huh? Maybe our plague stops when there's an offering on Mount Moriah for us. Wow. That's cool. Jesus sacrificed for us on this exact spot, right? In this area was for our sins. The plague that we have, right? The cancerous sin that is within us. But the king replied to Araunah, no, I insist on buying it. Hey, don't give it to me. I'm going to buy it. For I will not present burnt offerings to the Lord my God that have cost me nothing. No way, man. I am going to invest in the work of the Lord. Hey, God, help me to invest my money in the work of the Lord. Build our church. Build the community, right? Help me to invest in the work of God. Here you see David giving, investing, using his money, in a sense. Because why? Because, I invest in other things. Why can't I invest in the things of God? David saw that it was important. So David paid him 50 pieces of silver for the threshing floor and the oxen, and David built an altar to the Lord and sacrificed burnt offerings and peace offerings. Isn't that cool? Burnt offerings, peace offerings. These are dedication offerings, giving all of oneself. There was a burnt offering that was offered for you and I too. Someone gave all for us. That's right. The beautiful smells of the burnt offering that would go up into the air, right? Jesus is our burnt offering. He is a sweet aroma unto the Father for us. Ooh, that's heavy. And peace offerings. Jesus is our peace. Isn't it cool? and the Lord answered his prayer for the land, and the plague of Israel was stopped. Hey, our plague was stopped when Jesus died, and we put our faith in him. That's right, our plague stops, right? We are now inheritors of the Father, of his riches. We now become children of God, right? Not by our will, but by his doing. Oh man, some cool stuff for sure, Very, very cool. So let's see what you guys commented on in this wonderful, wonderful section. So Laura says, let me read that. It keeps switching. God doesn't want us to depend on ourselves. Amen. Right? On our own strength, our own might for our victory. We are to give God the glory in all situations. Amen. She also says, even now, we are heading on the direction of thinking that we humans are better than God with the AI computer intelligence that is being created to make it seem as though we do not need God for creation. That's right. We manipulate things. Us humans are pretty good manipulators, but we certainly are good creators, And so we had a great time in this book. Amazing chapter. I mean, a lot of good stuff we were able to pull out of there. And just be amazed, right? I love, too, the pictures of Jesus Christ in these books. And, we can see that everything's leading us up to this moment when not only Israel's plague would get cured, but the human plague would get cured. So, hey, we want to continue into 1 Kings. We will start 1 Kings tomorrow. And, man, we'll get into some other characters. And it'll be neat to see how Israel is doing under their kings after the time of King David. So, hey, interesting time. We will talk to y'all later. Have a great day, okay? Stay warm. Bye-bye.